rivers and canals provide something for everyone. Enjoying the scenery, having fun on the water, learning new skills, or just relaxing into a whole new, slow pace of life. One of the most important contributions to your enjoyment of this wonderful waterways world will be you and your crew's ability to handle the boat and operate the locks safely and without stress. This DVD aims to take the worry out of steering and handling a narrowboat and performing some basic maneuvers to enable you and your crew to enjoy your time spent on the water. Crewing a boat is a team effort with everyone mucking in and doing their bit. However, someone has to be in charge, and that person needs to ensure that everyone knows what they're expected to do. You'll need to decide which of your party will be the skipper. Life jackets are recommended, especially for under 18s and non-swimmers. Remember, the water can be very deep and at times extremely cold. A narrow boat weighs several tons, and you don't want any limbs or heads between it and a hard place or another boat. If you need to get from one end of the boat to the other whilst underway, go through the boat rather than walking along the side. When you need to stop your boat, remember it doesn't have brakes, and it's important to give yourself plenty of time. Ease off the throttle, move into neutral, and then use short bursts in reverse gear to slow the boat down and come to rest. Your boat won't always stop in a straight line and may need a short burst of forward gear to correct its position. Most canal boats are steered using a tiller, which is quite simple once you've had a little practice. Always stand in front of the tiller so it can't knock you if the rudder hits something under the water and swings the tiller over unexpectedly. Likewise, keep crew members clear of the tiller. The cardinal rule with all manoeuvres on the water is to think it through first and perform the manoeuvre slowly. Slow right down, just short of where you want to moor, with your boat parallel to the bank. Have a crew member ready at the front and move forward slowly, steering into the bank. Before the boat touches, use reverse to stop the boat and let your crew member step off with a mooring rope. There's no need to jump. It's all too easy to slip between the boat and the bank. If there's a convenient ring or bollard, use this to help steady the boat, but don't pull it tight or you'll prevent the back coming in. With the tiller pointing towards the bank, use the engine to bring the back in. Then use reverse gear to bring the boat to a halt, allowing you or another crew member to step off the back with a rope. Pull the boat into the bank and secure to the rings or bollards. It's a good idea to take the mooring ropes back to the boat rather than tying to the ring or bollard itself. If there are no rings or bollards, you'll need to put in mooring pins, again, where possible, taking the line back to the boat to secure. Pins should be kept away from the water's edge, but should never be positioned across the towpath. Always tie up with the ropes going outwards at roughly 45 degrees from the ends of the boat. When tying up, you won't need to learn lots of complex rope work. A few basic hitches will be all you need. The most common is the round turn and 2/2 hitches, used here to secure the back rope around the boat's bollards. If securing to a T-stud, take a couple of turns around the arms, then turn the rope under on itself to form a locking hitch. A good way to secure a rope temporarily around a bollard is the clove hitch. Form a loop in the rope, then take the free end around the bollard and place the loop over it. These 3 hitches should cover all the situations you're likely to meet. Make sure you never place your fingers between the rope and the bollards or rings. If the boat were to move, the rope could suddenly trap your fingers. Locks allow boats to travel uphill or downhill. They provide a chance for the whole crew to get involved and are often a place where you'll swap stories and local knowledge with other boaters. Locks do come in different shapes and sizes, but the principle of using them is pretty much the same. A lock is simply a chamber with gates to contain the water at either end. The flow of water in and out of the lock is controlled by sluices called paddles, which are operated using a windlass. The paddles at the top of the lock are used to let water in, and those at the bottom to let water out, thus raising or lowering your boat. Stop the boat well before the lock. Hold the boat with ropes and put one or more crew members ashore to get the lock ready. If there are only 2 of you, you may have a centre line. This makes it easier for one person to hold the boat steady, but the centre line should never be used for mooring up. The golden rule at locks is to take your time and do things methodically. Remember that some of the lock mechanisms can be stiff and heavy to operate. Consider getting your fittest or strongest crew members to do the hard work. Make sure you lift any side fenders before going into a lock. It's important that the steerer stays at the tiller at all times with the engine running, so the boat is always under control. Children love to get involved and help out at locks. It's all part of the adventure. But locks are deep with strong water flows, so be particularly vigilant and make sure they're always fully supervised. For younger children in particular, the paddle gear is often at head height, so keep them well clear. A spinning or flying windlass can cause a lot of damage. Never leave a windlass unattended on the paddle mechanism. It's important that crew operating paddles stay by their paddle mechanism until the lock is empty or full and they remain in contact with the skipper in case of emergency. Keep an eye on the boat at all times, and if anything goes wrong, close all paddles quickly and sort out the problem. Some locks have anti-vandal devices which you release with a handcuff key. Just a word about priority. Locks aren't operated on a first-come, first-served basis, but on whether the lock can be used by another boat without wasting water. For example, if you're going downhill and come to a lock that's empty, always check to see if another boat is approaching from below the lock. If so, the lock would be in their favour. Wait for them to enter and use the lock. You would have had to fill the lock anyway, so you might as well do it with a boat in it. Of course, if there isn't another boat coming, you don't need to wait for one to arrive. It's a case of using a little courtesy and common sense to save water. If there isn't another boat coming, make sure the gates and paddles at the far end of the lock are closed before lifting the paddles at the end nearest the boat to fill the lock. Make sure the windlass is a snug fit on the spindle by using the correct hole. All paddle mechanisms will have a safety catch of some type. These should always be engaged where possible. When the lock is full, push the gate open, steer the boat into the lock and make sure the top paddles are fully closed. Always wind the paddles back down. Letting them drop can cause them to break and put the lock out of action. Close the top gate. Then you can open the paddles in front to let the water out. The steerer needs to keep an eye on the back of the boat to make sure it's always clear of the top gate sill. If necessary, briefly engage forward gear to keep the boat away. Make sure the front is clear of the bottom gate and that the boat is floating freely. As the lock empties, you'll find that the bottom gates will open quite easily once the water levels are equalised. Trying to force them before they're ready is a total waste of effort. Close all paddles and, unless another boat is approaching, close the gates. Collect your crew, unless there's another lock close by, in which case it's easier for them to stay off the boat and walk ahead to get the next lock ready. Going uphill is a similar procedure. If the lock is full, make sure another boat isn't approaching, then empty it and steer the boat in. On most canals, you won't experience strong currents, but on some, water flows round the locks quite fast. If you see water movement, steer into the flow, as it will push the front of the boat away, then back as it passes. Close the bottom gates and make sure the paddles are fully down. To fill the lock, open the top paddles one at a time. Do this slowly. It's a good idea to initially lift the first paddle just halfway to avoid a great insurge of water that can throw the boat backwards and forwards, making it difficult to control. If the lock is fitted with paddles in the top gate, don't open them until they're underwater. Opening them too early can cause water to swamp the front of the boat. Again, open them slowly and keep a watchful eye on the boat at all times. When the lock is full, the gate will open easily. Check that the paddles are all down and close the gates after the boat, unless another boat is waiting to use the lock. Broad locks, that is ones which are wider than your boat, need a little extra care. Try to share with another boat whenever possible to save water, and always use the front and back ropes to steady the boat in the lock. When you're using the lock alone and going uphill, always slowly open the top ground paddle. That's the one on the lock side rather than the one in the gate, on the same side as the boat first. This way, the flow of water into the lock will help to keep the boat against the lock wall, making it easier to control. When the lock is part full, you can open the paddles on the opposite side as well. Don't use gate paddles until they're underwater. All of the road on the canals is to steer down the centre of the waterway, but to move to your right when you meet an oncoming boat. Pass each other slowly. Going faster makes it more likely that you'll go aground. If you're approaching a bridge or narrow section, slow down, and if an oncoming boat is closer to the bridge or narrow section, wave them through and keep to the right until they're well clear. However, on rivers, the boat travelling downstream has right of way. The speed limit on narrow canals is 4 miles per hour, which is equivalent to a brisk walking pace, but this is a maximum speed. On many canals, particularly if the water is shallow, you'll need to go much slower. Going too fast pulls the back of the boat deeper into the shallow water, making steering more difficult. The important thing is not to create a breaking wash which damages the bank. If another boat is slower than you, it's usual to keep your distance and stay behind. If the other boat wants you to overtake, the skipper will wave you on and pull over to one side and leave you room to pass slowly. A final word here about horn signals. Give a single long blast when the view ahead is obscured, such as blind bends, junctions or bridges. No one should ever end up in the water, but it could happen, and if it does, it's best to know what to do. If you're on a canal or a slow-flowing shallow river and someone falls overboard, you should immediately go into neutral. If it's safe to do so, turn off the engine to prevent the person in the water being dragged into the propeller. Throw them a lifebelt and then ask them if they can stand up. It's more than likely that they'll be able to wade to the side of most canals. Guide the boat slowly to the bank and get one of your crew to help the person ashore. If you're on a wider river or deeper waterway, throw a lifebuoy or lifeline close to them. Maneuver the boat to approach them very carefully from the front in order to keep them well away from the propeller. If there's any danger of them getting too close to the propeller, immediately select neutral gear. Pull them towards the front and side of the boat and help them aboard. But the best advice is to take great care not to fall in the first place. The canals are there for all to enjoy, whether boating, walking, fishing or cycling. You need to show consideration for other users. Your speed is probably the main thing to bear in mind. When passing moored boats, slow right down to tick over speed to avoid your wash pulling craft away from their moorings and possibly pulling out mooring pins. Slow your boat down well in advance to allow it to lose momentum before you reach the moored boats. The same applies to fishermen. Always slow down to tick over and keep to the centre of the canal unless asked to do otherwise. When mooring, always try to leave room for other boats and never moor on the approach to a lock or bridge, opposite a winding hole or at a water point. But if you take your time, tackle everything slowly and think things through first, you'll soon get used to handling your boat confidently. And your time on the waterways will be enjoyable and safe for you, for your crew, and for other waterway users. Happy cruising!